Welcome everyone to yet another SDN Community Voices, our weekly touch point between you, the members and followers of the Service Design Network, and all the amazing voices we have in this design community. My name is Felipe, and as always, I will be your ambassador and host. And today I'm really excited to have a full house panel of design podcasters. This is the main theme of today, podcasting as a medium. And I'll let them come in and introduce themselves, but I just wanted to say that before we dive in, a quick reminder to drop any questions you might have in the chat. We're going to introduce, or we're going to address them during our final Q&A segment. Also interact with us throughout. So now let's just bring everyone and ask them to introduce themselves. Let's just bring people. Hey, welcome everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
I think we can go in the order that we have on the screen. I think everybody has the same. So first Thorsten, then Suyog, and then so on.
Okay, yeah. Hey, so great to be here among all these wonderful people. I'm Thorsten. I'm the founder of the Sustainable UX Network, and I also run a podcast called the SUX Podcast or Sustainable UX Podcast. And with that, I give to the next person.
Hey everyone, Suyog here, talking to you from Mumbai right now. Service designer, yes, of course. But I run a podcast called Wifer, which is in Marathi, which is my mother tongue, the language we speak in a part of India. And me and my wife, we produce this. I do apply service design into the podcast. I won't say this podcast is heavily design, but I have had a design podcast before. So that's about me. I will talk about it more as we go ahead.
I'll take the baton. This is Ankush. I'm Indian, but based in Singapore. Currently, I teach at NUS, Service Design, UX Design, and multiple other disciplines. And I thought Singapore is quite a unique place where a lot is happening around service design, especially in the public sector space. So my podcast kind of focuses on that. I hand the baton to the next person.
Hello, this is Arthur. I'm originally from Taiwan and I'm based in Shanghai now. So our podcast show called Water Cooler Conversation is a service design podcast, but we call Water Cooler is because that we have shared memory in Taiwan back to 20 years that our water always say, please use the cold water. And we thought that's really cool because that back to 20 years, we have this service ideas from the machine says, please using the cold water. So that become now that we are podcast talking about service design in the Mandarin speaking world. Yeah, and to next.
Amazing. Gabriel?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Bedoya. I'm a designer and anthropologist. I'm based in the Sun City, Miami, and I co-fund a podcast called Hablemos de Service Design. It's basically targeted to Spanish-speaking audiences, and I'm very happy to be here.
Simone?
Hello.
No, it's okay. You can go, Mariana.
Yeah, go, Mariana. Go ahead.
My picture was before Simone. This is why I started. I don't know what's happened. So I am Mariana Salgado. I do Diseño y Diáspora. Diseño y Diáspora has now more than 630 episodes published and is on social design research, and is in Portuguese, in Spanish, mainly in Spanish and in English. And I podcast from Finland, and we are now in the summer, as you can see. But I am originally from Argentina.
Amazing. Simone?
Nice, Mariana. We are neighboring countries right now. I'm based in Sweden, although I come from Italy. And I am a designer who bases his practice in social sustainability. So recently I've been working with accessibility for people who live with disability. And I'm a guest curator and English host for Tacito podcast, where we bring perspectives from other fields to the design world so that designers and design can learn from them. And I will hand it over to Anna, I think, right?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. I'm Hannah Clark. I'm based in Canada, and I host the Product Manager podcast. So like the title would indicate, we focus a lot on product management, but we also cover a lot of other kind of tertiary topics like a lot of UX design, more recently systems thinking. Yeah, we kind of cover the gamut that kind of connects to development and product. And I'm really excited to interact with all of you amazing people.
Amazing. But I think just to start us off, I was just bring a question. And I think what I was thinking a little bit yesterday and today was why podcasting? And I open to anybody that wants you to start talking. Why did you start on podcasting? What do you think about this medium and anything like that?
Oh, I'll take that one, if that's okay.
I can start if you want. Yes.
No, Hannah?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Hannah.
Sure. I'll be brief. The truth is that we started podcasting because we thought we actually have a digital publication as well, and we thought that it would make us seem more legit. But it turns out that we actually really fell in love with the medium of podcasting, and in particular for me, I found as things have changed and we've become more focused on generative AI, podcasting is kind of one of those mediums that's really expanded and has really picked up speed rather than kind of losing speed, which a lot of other mediums have. And I find that it's a really amazing way to kind of connect with people, learn directly through conversations, and find, how organically you can become more knowledgeable as a host, and you can kind of connect the dots between different people that you've spoken to and the experiences that you've collected. But it's also a medium that you can meet more people where they are, because it doesn't depend on a visual medium. You can come with people on their commute. You can come with people with whatever they're doing while they're running or whatever. So yeah, it's easier to reach your audience, and it's also easier to expand your knowledge through your conversations.
Yeah. Mariana?
Well, I started doing the amateur radio here in Helsinki for Spanish speakers and interviewing designers. And then I realized I really wanted to listen more the global south. So for me was, for one side, the possibility to reconnect with my region and also to relearn how to speak Spanish fluently, because after 18 years I have been here when I started this podcast, my Spanish was not anymore fluid. I used to work in English and Finnish, and then I couldn't express myself with the richness that a professional Spanish need. So it was a bit to learn Spanish and to learn from the global south, because I already have been doing a PhD and a postdoc here, and I thought, okay, now it's time to learn from other voices.
Yeah, I hear a little bit of things here, like the non-video medium, the cultural aspect, the language aspect. I think anybody has anything else to add on that? I think Gabriel had there.
Yes. We started a podcast because many of our clients are Spanish-speaking audiences, and we have been in business for about 20 years. And one of the probably most difficult things that we find during all these years is people do not understand what service design is, what human-centered design is. And we got a lot of questions from our clients, and even not in America, also in Latin America, where we do part of our job. And people is asking, what do you guys do? And it's hard in trying to teach them and to explain what service design is and what human service design means too. So we say, okay, why not we create a podcast and we start like lecturing people, but I don't want to be like, this is a class in the university. Yeah, when we create something like this, relax, like chill out, like a conversation. So that's how our podcast started. It basically is a way to train and also to educate some of our clients and some of the audience about what service design is.
I think Arthur had a thought there also.
Yep. I think in Asia that we find out that the people don't got the time to talk and have a conversation. So that's the reason we're using the podcast, because using the other media, people tracing for like a short term or relatively short time to consume anything. So I think the podcast for us is like give a good opportunity to have a long phone conversation with our guests. So every time we will have a guest in our podcast to share their story using server design to change their work, change their organization, even change their family. So any things like that, we are trying to have this kind of conversation, share their story, how using service design in the many way of doing the things. So I think that was the key, have a long form conversation and have the opportunity to doing that. Yeah.
I mean, podcast.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, just because my story of starting a podcast is very different. I come from like being a creator sort of a background. So just to have multiple videos a week, I thought podcast is less production efforts and higher value, because I was making vlogs and all those kind of videos before, back in 2017. So that's why I started doing English podcasts. We did it for 5 years, but then it was after learning the craft of conversations production, because we have a video podcast as well. So then it was more about product market fit, and why I do a Marathi podcast right now, because we found the product market fit there, and now our podcast is kind of our service design project. So that's how I look at it, and that as I said, I apply service design in creating this podcast. So we do a lot of iterations, experimentations, holistic research, and all those things, and it has turned out pretty well. Like last year, we had, just in 2024, we had 100 million views across platforms and 3 million hours of watch time. So yeah, but it comes with challenges. The market gets saturated, so you have to always come up with something new. So that's my take on podcasting in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we have also a lot of different languages here on the podcastings that we have in this table. So it's always interesting to, I think, consume media in different languages, in your own language, even relearning your own language, as Mariana was saying, right? I kind of felt what she was saying, because I'm also living in Europe for the past 6 years. So Portuguese, Spanish, languages that I grew up in sometimes kind of slip. So you try to get that information from somewhere else, right? Go on, Kush.
Yeah, interesting perspectives, and I thought I'll add mine in. So when I started, the reason I was starting was because I teach a lot of students and they learn a lot of theory of what service design is, but they don't know how it works out in organizations, and especially in governments and public sector. And we started interviewing them, who are people who are working in these organizations, and asking them how does it look like. And they started telling us these stories. And I think I see our podcast more of a stories which these students can hear, get inspired, and know how these service design methodologies and frameworks works in organizations. So even though we might not have millions of views, but the views which we get are from these students who come back to us with many more questions, and they get connected to each other. So it's a networking platform, it's a story platform, and it will definitely be a great repository for all these people for the years to come by.
Amazing. And I think there's a lot of storytelling, or sharing the story we're talking also about here, and hearing what are the different perspectives that people have. And changing a little bit the pace here, I wanted to kind of shift to this question of what is an interesting story that maybe got stuck with you in a previous episode in your podcast or a previous conversation.
Maybe I can jump in here, and because in terms of the stories, I think for me personally, the great thing of doing a podcast is the type of conversation that you get with the people that you have as your guest. And some of you said that before, right? It's a much deeper conversation. It's not this well-shaped presentation stuff like thing, but if you get to a point where you get into a real conversation where you not only speak about the typical topics and buzzwords, right, that everybody expects, that's when the great stories actually start. I mean, I'm talking about sustainability and all these things, and so we talk a lot about nature and these things, and that's also the feedback that I get and that we get from listeners, that they really like these things, right? These unexpected things, these nuances, these how to connect our day-to-day world and work to other things. And that's what I feel what really happens in these conversations. So for me, I know the typical length of a podcast is, I don't know, it's 20 minutes or something, right? So my podcasts are always at least 1 hour. And at some point it said it has to be, because that's then I can get to this conversation and into this deep conversation and get to further topics. And that's what I personally think is super important and maybe makes this so valuable. And this is only possible at this medium, I think. And that's where the great stories actually come from my personal experience.
Well, Mariana.
Well, for me, it's not one story, but it's the choir of stories. So normally I pick a topic. It could be, for example, how designers are collaborating with indigenous people. And then I go through different countries, like really trying to have like geographical diversity and also discipline diversity, because my podcast is not only about service design, but it's also include architecture, urbanism, fashion, textile, etc. So for me, is the way of how we could learn from each other from different parts of the world, because a lot of us are Spanish or Portuguese speaking people working and living in other continents and not in our own regions. For me, it's not one story, but this learning from each other, this supporting the peer learning. And definitely I agree with Thomas that to go deep in the conversations, you need an hour at least. And I record quite long podcasts, but then there is a lot of edition there in order to to extract the best parts. So we put a lot of effort in editing that, and we might get out 15 minutes. So they are all around 50, 40 minutes long. It's a question of accessibility, right? Like we tried that the content is accessible, and the podcast as a format is very accessible, especially when you are trying to document a lot of this work that might not be so easy to document only through figures and drawings.
Amazing. Gabriel.
That's a great perspective to put things in that way. Our podcast is pretty young, and the truth is we have an idea, but we don't have a plan. We just bring an idea of what we want to talk in the podcast and on the episode, but then we start, talking about the anecdotes that we have in all these years working as a service designers and as an anthropologist in the field of design. And the good thing is we try all the time to involve our audience to some very classic and very simple stories about how to do transformations. And we also use a format that at least is 1 hour of conversation, because being in like a short, like 12 minutes format is very hard for us, even though if we are storytellers, so telling a story in 12 minutes is very hard. But the idea of our podcast is just to educate the audience about service design as a lifestyle, not as a methodology.
Amazing. I think I connected a little bit what you just said with what Suyog was also saying about using service design in the podcasting format, not necessarily to talk about service design. So iterating in the format itself. So do you have some, let's say, reflections on how you iterated from when you started to now how you are, what you learned along the way?
I think, Hannah.
Oh, sure. When I started, it was very green, but what I've kind of developed over time is this really mandatory process of meeting with my guest ahead of time in order to kind of discuss the topic. And usually we lead with what are you passionate about? We usually have a few ideas based on what the guest is an expert in and that kind of thing. But what's most important to me is that we're going to be telling a story that they are personally invested in, that they're going to speak to with a lot of energy, which is, I find, just the most infectious thing. And it really allows you to kind of get into much more expansive conversations around some of the topics that might be a shared interest. But we've had over time some guests try to opt out of this kind of pre-call process that we have, because it's just, they're too busy or they want to send their assistant or whatever. I make it a mandatory thing because it's not only just important for me to be able to get a sense of, what's the meat of the conversation so that we can kind of have an idea where the value is going to be in the conversation, and I can tee the guest up in order to offer their best insights. But it's also an opportunity for us to kind of connect and build some rapport so that when we're speaking on the podcast, where it's not the first time that we're meeting, and we kind of have some familiarity and comfort level, which I think is also, it's like one of those nonverbal things that really makes a difference in the overall experience for the listener. I found that, just that kind of two-part process and being able to co-author a few sort of guiding questions to make sure that the conversation doesn't meander too much while allowing for some flexibility and ability to explore tangents. That's really kind of been our sweet spot.
Suyog?
Yeah, no, I would agree with Hannah on that. Like, even when we shoot our episodes, we have like 1 hour of coffee before we get into the studio and sit here. So it's always helps to get them comfortable and get that chemistry going on instead of just jumping into something randomly. So I 100% agree. After doing this for some time now, what I've realized, when you have these conversations on weekly basis for at a stretch with so many people, you start feeling empty as a person. So I think to push that boundary, what I try to do, or what me and Prachi, my partner, both of us do, is we try to go around and do something completely different and keep updating our character and building our, let's say, palette. Because doing these conversations, or some of the episodes we have is 2.5 hours, 2 hours 45 minutes. After that, you are drained. And what new value will you add next time you sit with some other person? So I think individually, it has taught me a lot to like really up your game in understanding art, or in general exploring different things. So next time you sit in that chair, you have something within which makes you comfortable and confident. Otherwise you feel very empty at points when you are on the camera and with everybody around you. So that is personal growth, which I got because of the podcast, that I have to always be updated or just be curious in things so that I don't saturate this particular part of my life.
Amazing. Mariana?
Well, once in 2 years, we have done it already twice. We do a questionnaire, and we ask professors and educators in design, how do they use the podcast in design education, in formal design education. This is one way we have. And another that I think it's very similar to the question that now comes from Gabriela in the chat. She asked, how do we build relationships with our audiences? And it's a way, definitely, to listen what is going on around, listening, like, for example, now reading the chat that is coming, is part of how do we build and we grow our podcast, like all the time being super aware that what people are telling to us is important. So I am always in contact with different research and design communities and trying to listen what they need. So I do a lot of, for example, collaboration with series that I co-host together with another person. So the other person is the expert, for example, let's say in decolonial design, or in it could be artificial intelligence, it could be whatever topic, and then we do together interviews. And this is also a way I found out in order to better connect with the audience, because actually the researchers, professors, educators listening to my podcast, they are also they want to build upon what I have. So I want to share and make this podcast format as open as possible. And sometimes it's not obvious how to.
Yeah, amazing. Right before I pass the ball to Thorsten and Ankosh, I would just mention that we also want to hear from you. So already had a question there from Claudia, but if anybody else that's listening to us right now wants to ask a question to any of these people, or in general about podcasting, service design, and things like that, go for it and we will answer them live. So now, Thorsten.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to especially what you said, Hannah, and because I do it a little bit different. So I never have a long pre-conversation with my guests. So we meet a little bit earlier to just, well, say hello, etc., etc. I usually prepare some rough questions, so a very rough outline for the podcast, and I send this to the guest in advance and say, hey, if there is anything that is a no-go for you, totally fine. But by this, so for me personally, I think it keeps the conversation fresher for me if we do not have talked about things, because that sometimes then leads us to new directions, and I really love going with the flow and explore directions that we make up actually during the conversation. So that's just a little different way how I do it actually, though I totally see your point and see how that works pretty well. It just works different for me, having not spoken too much actually in advance about these things, but fall into the conversation and see where it leads, and wonderful things happen sometimes then.
Yeah, I mean, a conversation is always a two-way street, right? So it has to work for both sides. So for different people, it's always going to be different. But I think we have Ankush first, and then Gabriel.
Sure, thanks. And it feels like Thorsten just spoke my mind. So I have a very similar approach, right? I have a mind map of what I want to ask, but the questions aren't framed out. And as someone rightly said in the chat group too, it's almost like a user research and an interview. So the conversation flows and you see whether it's flowing in the right direction. And sometimes if it's going into tangent, which you don't want to pick up, maybe you bring them back. So that's very organic. That's the way I like to do it. And I think I also like to connect it to one of the earlier questions which you were asking. Were there stories or conversations which were left unsaid in a podcast? And I think like any conversation, it's never finished. So none of my podcasts are like, all right, this is all done. And now I'm not going to talk to this person. But that never happens, because that's where most of the conversations also start. So we meet them so many more times, have so many more stories to share to each other. And then it becomes a much more longer, professional and lifelong relationship. And the last point before I hand it over to someone else is, I think it's also every podcast is an iteration on the previous one. So you learn from it, and then the next one becomes better, and then the next one becomes better. Or something changes. So sometimes you might change your question and it fails, and then you learn and change it in the next one, and it makes it a much better podcast than the previous one. So thank you, and sharing, giving it to someone else now.
Gabriel.
Yeah, we pretty much in the same direction as Thorsten. We, as I mentioned before, we have an idea. We don't have a plan. We just let the flow take us to whatever we need to go. But basically, one of the basements of our podcast is starting making clear that in our process, empathy is the base of everything. So we start building from empathy, and that's probably we work around the empathy in many cases that we explore in the podcast. I'm also very, if I can say so, I'm very anthropologist during the conversations, because I let people talk freely, and then I start picking ideas and trying to explore from there where this is going to take us. It's about inside hunting inside the podcast, which is part of what we do. And I think, we let the conversation flows, and we start, working around about the topics that we have on the conversation. We have an idea, but we do have a plan.
Amazing. I mean, with that, we're coming. Oh yeah, Mariana. Mariana? Yeah.
Hello.
Go.
Can you hear me? I wanted to just ask you something, because I'm curious. Most of my audience nowadays, 60% are females and only 40% are males. And as we know, the podcast, like as a medium, is mostly hosted by males, and this apparently is also true in design. I wanted to know, who are your listeners, and what do you know about them?
Easy question. whoever wants to jump in.
Same here. It's even
Not only in terms of female and male, right? You can expand on that.
Thorsten and Gabriel.
it's same for me. It's even more than 60. I don't know, 65% are female on the podcast, and I find that really interesting as well.
Gabriel?
We have a very big female audience, but basically our audience is students, a lot of the students, design students, anthropology students, and I have a very big crowd of anthropologists that want to become service designers, and they want to understand that because it's very different from classical anthropology, what we do on the field as service designers. I have also some entrepreneurs, some of our clients. That's basically some people that got driven by curiosity, and some of them are entrepreneurs, startups. Many startuppers are in our audience. So, and we have some audiences and in places that we never even imagined before. That these people listen to our podcast in Patagonia, for example, and in places that we have no idea that they listen to our podcast. So I'm very happy to do this. It started as a joke. This podcast like let's see what happens, and then we start receiving emails from places that we have no idea. People, we have that kind of reach.
Amazing. Suyog?
I think for us also majority of the months we are more female listeners than male, which is great because in India usually are 80% male and 20% female on a typical YouTube channel. So for us it's great. Age wise it's pretty varied because we are kind of in a domain where we have something for someone, like each episode is for someone. We have now shifted our gear to think in terms of different IPs, like different shows. So on our channel, we have multiple shows and each show has a specific target audience. And that's how we are building, because initially we thought we have to make it for everyone, but then it started to like fizzle out. So now we are into zone where we have something for young people who have maybe not so high retention rate. So we have fast cuts in that, maybe music is added for some stuff, but then we have long listeners who are maybe older than those people. So now we are in that zone where we are launching different IPs for different segments for different people. And to kind of build the community and build that connect with your audience, we are doing multiple activities across mediums. So we have a live show which we do in front of people. It's a storytelling show for 2 hours with music, beatbox, everything. So we do that where we go and actually meet people behind all these thumbnails which we see on the screen. Then we have a 7,500 people newsletter community where we write literature pieces and send. Then we have an e-magazine which we send. We have community membership where people are paying. So as I said, it's applied service design. Our audience are mostly uncles and aunties in the household. So you can't send them to a platform where you have like Patreon or something where you have to log in and consume content and you have to do separate things. So we had to do a lot of trial and test where to make it available to them maybe on WhatsApp, because that's how they are. They know how to use WhatsApp. So we try these different things. But as audience, we have a wide range. So we try to cater to each. It's tough many a times, but we are trying.
Amazing.
I think it's super interesting what you have said, like all the things that comes from the podcast, like or that go around the ecosystem of the podcast, that you have the newsletters, because for us, for example, we have edited 4 books of interviews in which, we have done a lot of work on making a more consistent documentation of each of the interviews, and we came back to the interviews and asked for more questions, and then published 4 books that are online and for free as part of this type of things that we produce, not only the podcast now, and sometimes we also produce live panels that are only in our YouTube channel.
Amazing. I think Simone had...
I guess all the others are. Yeah.
Simone?
Yes. No, it was still a question to your answer, Mariana, that our audience is, we produce the podcast mainly here from Europe. Now the team we're based half of it in Sweden and half of it in Spain. but we have a huge audience in the USA, Spanish speakers, especially because our podcast is bilingual. So that's also an interesting detail. But I don't have anything to say about the genders because I have no clue about our. Still have to do some research.
Spotify for creators.
Yeah,
It tells you.
Amazing. So Hannah, and then Ankush, I think. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, I kind of going to answer a few questions at the same time here. With regards to our audience, what we usually focus on is more audience behavior, more so than audience demographics. Excuse me. So what we'll usually look at is what kinds of topics tend to get the highest amount of downloads, get a sense of what our audience is interested in order to kind of get ideas for future episodes. We also tend to look into, where do they drop off? What kinds of things are they interested in, or what kinds of things tend to be a turnoff where they stop listening? So we often really take into account more the behavior, more so than like the information about the audience. But we also think about the topics that we're choosing are often kind of a discovery mechanism for people to find us. So we sometimes will shoot for a broader appeal episode to try and funnel more attention towards the show, because we know that it's one that people are searching for and people are interested in learning more about. So we'll sometimes depart from those insights to kind of see, try a new experiment, try to see what people are interested in, gauge their interest. But beyond that, one of the things that we found really useful for both connecting with our audience, building that kind of two-way relationship, and also learning more about what they're interested in, is interacting through other mediums that help us promote the podcast. So the newsletter has been a really important lever for us. We use that in order to kind of talk a little bit about what we have coming on the show, and actually ask questions to the audience where they're able to kind of engage with us in a more direct way. But another thing that I've been trying out this year that's been really useful is something that I call meeting roulette, in which on LinkedIn, I'll sometimes open my calendar for anyone to book in. It's usually listeners, usually people who know who I am. And it just anyone can book a 30-minute meeting with me if they are so brave. And that's been really cool because I've been able to connect with, I had one woman in Ghana who was at the beginning of her career, and she had a lot of interesting things to say about the show, which was, it was really amazing to be able to actually talk to someone who listens to the show and really get a sense of the reach and kind of the responsibility that comes with that. And been able to connect with people all over the world who either listen to the show or have insights that I can draw from. So yeah, I think it's like learning more about your audience through those conversations has been really useful, but also kind of seeing where your conversations can sort of reach more people by virtue of the nature of the topic.
Amazing. And then finally, Ankush.
Thanks. Interesting perspectives once again. So I looked at the statistics of my podcast, and it seems pretty equal. There is no one over the other, but I think when I teach classes, I have seen quite extreme sometimes. And I've taught classes in Singapore and in Hong Kong as well. And I'm not sure, is it very geography specific, but there was one class, for example, and there was no male in the class at all. It was all full of females. It was a class of 25 folks. And I thought, wow, this is wonderful. And right the next day, I did another class, which was just full of males. And I was like, what's happening? So sometimes it might be of chance, but at least I see again in these geographies that there is a lot more interest from females to do maybe mid-career switches or to learn something more. And I definitely get much more engagement from our female students who are in the classroom. And they listen to our podcast, and afterwards they might set up a call or send an email asking so much more about what they have learned or heard. So definitely much more engagement from the female side in at least the geography I have been.
Amazing. And finally, Gabriel.
Basically, to resume, our podcast started as an experiment. We have no idea about what we are saying and what we are doing. We're not professional podcasters, and we don't pretend to be. And it started as an experiment, and it's tailor-made by the feedback that we receive by the listeners. They are the ones who tell us what they wanted to here in the future episodes. They tell us, okay, why don't you guys speak more about this? We are interested in hearing more about this experience or this idea or this methodology or this whatever. So we don't have a plan. We have an idea. We have an experiment. I can probably say that I don't know if it's a social experiment, even though, but it's an experiment that we do, and we launch it as an experiment, and we wanted to keep it as an experiment.
Amazing. I think that reminds me a little bit of this comment that Michael left, that there's no right way to podcast, just experiment. As you're saying, you said we're not professional podcasters. I think nobody is really a professional podcaster. You're just going there and using the medium and trying to make it more accessible to the audience, as we were discussing. But with that, we're coming also to the end of our time together. I extended a little bit because I think the conversation was going so well, but I think we stop here, and hopefully we can either continue this conversation in future episodes or in any of your podcasts. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
And when it's a full house, it's always harder to take everybody from the screen. But to anybody that joined us online, that asked any questions or just interacted with us, thank you very much. I always say that this series is really because of the people of you that are watching us and engaging live. So stay connected with us through our social media. You can find here the link tree for the Service Design Network on any future episodes of the SDN Community Voices, and also all the amazing other works that are being done both by Service Design HQ and also all the global SDN chapters we have around the world. And for now, thank you very much, and hope to see you again next Thursday. Bye-bye.